Welcome to the Communication Mastery Podcast with me, Mark Burlinson. We're tackling miscommunication with the power of understanding. We're growing our mastery of the foundation of teamwork and of all relationships. And so I want to ask you to help me spread the word about stronger, more effective communication by inviting some friends to listen along with you. Then discuss what you've learned and give me your feedback. What would you like to hear from us in future episodes so we can make this podcast even more effective? Thanks for joining me. Let's jump in. This week, we're going to have another question and response episode, looking at some of the questions that have been sent in. And I've grouped these into four kind of groupings, categories, if you like. And we're going to start out by talking about interpersonal communication and leadership communication. I've got three different questions that have been sent in on this kind of area, this topic. And the first question is this: how does a leader's tone and timing influence morale and productivity? I wonder what's going on for the person who would ask this. I think the person who asked it is a leader themselves, so they're looking to learn rather than a disgruntled team member who wishes their leader would be different. But either way, let's talk about the leader's tone and the leader's timing. Timing is very important when you're leading a group or a team, because you can easily affect morale by addressing things too slowly, or by addressing things too quickly before you've thought through what needs to be said. So the timing is a vital part of it. It's always important to pause, especially if the communication or the interaction is something important. Pause and think about, how can I make this most effective? How can I be as clear as possible? And if you need tips on clarity, go back to the episode on clarity in communication and see if there's more ideas in there that you can pick up on. But the tone is also very important, because as a leader, you want to convey confidence, you want to convey understanding, you want to convey empathy, but you also want to convey a sense of vision and mission that draws your team to travel with you to the goals that you're seeking to reach. And so sometimes a leader's tone can unintentionally undermine the result you want. If you're asking people to do better, or to change something that they're doing that you think needs to be modified or adapted in some way, it's always better to invite them to do that than to push them to do that. So again, tone of voice can really convey a different message than you intended if you're not careful. Because usually when we're addressing those kind of areas as leaders, we're frustrated by something that's not working. And if we let that frustration come through in our communication, then the tone of the communication is going to undermine morale, it's going to undermine productivity, rather than cultivating a higher level of those things. So important to take the time to reflect on what is the most fruitful, productive way to communicate what needs to be communicated. And also to remember that different people receive in different ways. It's always important, we've said this in previous episodes, it's always important to embrace the emotive communicators at the start of your communication, in order that you don't leave them behind or leave them feeling left out. So you want to engage their emotion with whatever it is that you want to address before moving into the cognitive, practical information and correction or increase of clarity that's needed around whatever area you're addressing, before then moving to the kinetic languages and speaking about the actions and the steps that are going to follow. So leader's tone, leader's timing really can influence morale. And if you take the time, maybe even get someone else to help you with some input and coaching on the best way to do that. I've found when I've had something really important to communicate, it's been very helpful to prepare in advance by discussing it with someone who's skilled in communication, so that I can communicate most effectively and not unintentionally undermine the goal that I'm working for. The second question, this is an interesting one. What does active listening actually look like in a small business environment? Active listening, of course, is vital for communication to be effective, because I don't want to just listen to respond. I don't want to be sitting listening to you thinking about what am I going to say, either to disagree or to put into practice what it is you're saying, because I'll miss some of what you are saying. So active listening in a small business environment primarily looks like reflecting what I've heard so that I'm giving you full attention for whatever time it takes to hear you properly and truly. But then I'm going to reflect back what I think I've heard and give you opportunity to adjust that or to correct that or to add to that if there's something I've missed. And that can often be a challenge in a small business because small businesses operate on small time margins, don't they? We don't often have time for long conversations. That's why active listening can be so powerful in a small business setting. This is not something that you can't afford the time for. This is something that you can't afford not to do because time is short. And so active listening for a small business owner looks like not being distracted by all of the other areas of the business in the moment of the communication. Giving it 1, 2, 3, 4 minutes is not going to spoil the rest of your business, but losing attention for those 3 or 4 minutes could easily impact your business for several hours, putting right what you missed. And so it's an important investment. It's a challenge, but it is an important investment, especially if you're the one leading the business. But if you're also working in a small business for a boss who's doing their best to make it all work, make it all happen, your active listening is also a vital contribution to the business success and therefore to your well-being, to you keeping a job even, that you actively listen. It's very tempting when you have a business owner and you're not the business owner. It's tempting to kind of tune them out. Leave me alone, let me get on with my job kind of attitude. And that can also be disastrous for you as a person because you're going to miss some of what is being said to you. And you're going to not have the full understanding. So although active listening is important in every business, it's especially important in a small business. We don't have the time to waste on miscommunication. And so active listening, reflecting what I think I've heard and getting clarification and feedback so that I make sure I've heard correctly and fully what's being communicated. That's vital whether you're the owner or whether you're an employee. Third question under the whole area of leadership and interpersonal communication is this one. How do you communicate expectations without micromanaging? It can be so easy to get into micromanagement, can't it? Especially if you're strong in some of those practical cognitive languages that can see everything that needs to be done, or the kinetic languages that love to get things finished and get things done. Micromanaging is a temptation for all of us if we're honest. So communicating expectation without micromanaging can be a challenge. Again, especially in a small business setting, that's one of the ones that we focus on, especially in this podcast. So when I'm communicating an expectation of you, I need to be sure that the achievement of the expectation rests with you and not with my follow-up. At the same time, I need to be sure that I'm setting appropriate boundaries and follow-up scheduling so that there is some accountability on the achievement or the management of whatever task or expectation we're outlining. So it's going to be a compromise, if you like, between I want you to do this and I check back in an hour to see are you doing it yet, or I want you to do this and I forget about it for 2 weeks and never check back with you. There's got to be somewhere in between, and ideally that should be agreed between those who are setting the expectations and those who are having expectations set for them. There needs to be a discussion often, unless this is some life or death situation. I would like you to have called 10 potential customers by the end of this week. Is that something you can commit to? And when should I check in with you to see how it's going? If this is Monday and we're talking about 5 days, maybe you want me to check in on Wednesday. We're halfway through the week. How's it going? Or maybe you want to say, you know what, I'm not really good at calling that many people, and so I need a bit of a push to help me do that. Will you check in with me tomorrow to see how many I've called? That kind of thing. So if you have a discussion about the outworking of the expectations, then you can avoid micromanaging because you're being clear from the start. What are we agreeing to? If there's a clear agreement, then you can avoid that micromanagement. Micromanagement usually comes when the person who's managing isn't confident in the feedback and the report back of the person they're giving the expectations to. Or the person who's being given the expectation is resistant to what's being asked of them. Both of those things can be resolved by discussion on the front end, and that's what I would recommend. Let's switch our focus now to communication with customers and clients, communication to those outside of the daily employees of the business. Here's an interesting question. What are the most common communication mistakes that small businesses make with customers? The first, I think, would be to not hear what the customer is saying. And this is where active listening comes in. If I'm not hearing clearly what the customer is truly saying or asking, then the answer I'm going to give or the response that I'm going to make is not going to satisfy the customer. And that is going to put the customer at a disadvantage and actually affect my ability to retain that customer or serve that customer well. And then another communication mistake that small businesses often make with customers, especially if they've got a wider customer base, something like a retail store or a busy office. The common communication mistake is to try to communicate to all customers with the same communication, to try to say one thing to everybody in the same way and at the same time, because not everybody can receive in the same way or at the same time. There's a great deal of value in segmenting your communication, particularly if you're talking about marketing or customer service, where you segment your communication to different sections of your customer base, rather than trying to be everything to everyone in every communication. That becomes very bland. It becomes kind of like the very worst style of office decor or hotel decor, where everything is this sort of creamy beige color and there's no differentiation. So that's a common mistake that small businesses can make. Because time is short, it can often be difficult, but there are many tools available these days to help you refine and segment your communication. Have your email list divided up with tags or segments or labels, whatever your software would use, so that you know who are the customers who buy these kinds of things, or who are the customers who require that kind of service, so that you can communicate to them. There's no point in advertising, I don't know, dog food to cat owners when you're a pet food store, those kinds of things. So if you can be clear about where your customers fit into your profile of the business reach, then you can be direct and clear with specific areas. Next question. How do you train your team to speak consistently with the voice of your brand? This question sounds like it contradicts what I just said, doesn't it? But actually, the voice of your brand is distinct from the specifics of what you need to say. It's how you say it. Rather like, as you're aware, my communication style has an English accent. That's the voice of my brand, if you like. I'm the English guy that helps Americans and others with communication. And so there's a flavor and a tone to the way I express things and the way I say things that is the voice of my brand. And your brand has a voice as well. It may be that you're professional and reserved, or it may be that you're confident and chatty. It may be that you're just a little quirky in the way you communicate. Some of the most successful brands are the ones that have just a little edge of, oh yeah, That's them. That's what they're like. That's how they sound. And so if you can show your team, hopefully your team has been drawn to your company and to your brand by the voice of the brand. Uh, the way that brands differentiate themselves will draw people to them. Very often, unless it's purely salary, the people who are drawn to one particular brand in a marketplace are the ones who identify with the voice of that brand. And so you can help your team uh, to uh, to embrace the voice of your brand by helping them to recognize what it was that drew them to being part of your team in the first place. I'm thinking of brands like Southwest Airlines, who up until very recently have always been known for being friendly as well as cheap, of treating people just a little differently because they've thought through what their customers want. They don't attract the customers who want, the best service in first class. But they do attract the customers who appreciate their slight quirkiness, and most of their employees go along with that. If ever you've listened to a pre-flight announcement on Southwest, it's usually one of those ones with a lot more humor, a lot more creativity within the defined communication than you'll get on some of the larger legacy airlines, the older airlines. So you train your team to speak consistently with the voice of your brand by showing them that voice in their own experience, and then helping them to internalize that voice, as well as including in, again, there are many tools these days that can help you with the true voice of your brand. Artificial intelligence has added this component to us, so you can make sure that your communication, especially written communication, but even in your scripting for spoken communication, has the tone that you want. I want this to be in the tone of professional consultancy, for example. That's a very different tone from, I want this to be in the tone of a late night talk show. Those kinds of changes can be made not for you to follow slavishly, but for them to inform you and help you to refine what you're saying and how you're saying it into those different categories that help to identify the clients and the customers that you're targeting and the way that your brand is known within the market. Third question under customer and client communication is, what should a small business owner do when a conversation with a client or a customer goes off the rails? Typically, this is to do with customers feeling dissatisfied with something that you've either said or done. And so the first thing you want to do is to own that you were responsible for what happened to this point. You want to own your part of whatever went wrong. Let's say, for example, that a customer was promised a delivery on Friday, and this is now Tuesday of the following week, and there's no sign of the delivery. Well, then you need to first of all accept and state to the customer, I realize that this is a problem at our end, and I own that, and I'm going to look into it right now, and I'm going to get straight back to you to tell you what I discover so that we can resolve this as quickly as possible for you. So I'm taking responsibility in a way that's not fawning or getting emotionally involved, but it's simply being professional of, I'm going to find out what went wrong here, but I have a sense of urgency because I see your sense of urgency. And so if I can communicate that first, then the conversation often won't go as far off the rails as it needs to. One of the things that pushes conversations off the rails is a sense of not being heard or not being understood, or my priorities not being priorities for you. And so the small business owner needs to make sure you grab the ownership of this conversation again before it goes any further off the rails. And then secondly, you want to be sure that you're adapting your response to the need of the client. Again, this is where the communication IQ model comes in so valuably, because we can distinguish between customers or clients who are cognitive in their communication, rather than those who are emotive in their communication, or those who are kinetic in their communication. If a customer is motivated by action, I want to give them action. If a customer is feeling big feelings, I want to identify with and acknowledge those feelings. I may not agree with them, but I want to acknowledge that they're there, and then find ways to then turn those feelings around into a solution. Or if this is a cognitive interaction, it may be that the customer simply wants more information, or it may be that the customer needs to know that there is a plan. And again, learning the communication IQ model really helps us to be able to discern which of those tactics is a bad word, one of those techniques, to be able to create a connection again with a customer whose conversation has gone off the rails is very important for us to be able to bring that conversation back and resolve it, both to the satisfaction of the customer and to the benefit of the business. Your business is a wheel with many, many spokes. From leadership and management to customer relations and marketing, communication is the hub of that wheel that causes everything else to work effectively. It makes the wheel turn when communication is working well. So oil the wheel of your business by focusing on communication IQ. Strengthen collaboration, provide exceptional customer support, boost sales performance, even facilitate effective learning. Contact me today and let's get your business moving forward faster without misunderstanding. I guess that question leads us on into the next category. In fact, it may have belonged in this next category. I want to just address 2 or 3 questions here about conflict and crisis communication, because that's often an area where communications get tough, isn't it? When there's a conflict or when there's a crisis. So let's look at a couple of these. This question is a hard one. How do you handle tough conversations like firing someone or dealing with an unhappy client? Sometimes you don't have the luxury of preparing in advance, but in general, the tougher the conversation, the more I want to prepare appropriately for it in advance. So if I have to fire someone, I will want to think through what is important to this person in order for them to receive the firing in a way that helps them going forward. I want to create the setting and the climate where out of a hard situation they can actually go to a better place in themselves in the future. I may not have a solution for the problem. They may be being fired for cause. But it may be that this is simply a reduction in force and I have to let them go. Either way, I don't want them to stay in the place that they'll be in as soon as we've had this conversation. I want to, as best I can, equip them and prepare them to be in a better place moving forward so that they benefit from the firing. And so preparation in advance is vital there. With an unhappy client, you don't always have the opportunity to prepare in advance. And I want to refer back to the previous question where the first step is to own that you see the issue. So many of the communication languages need to know that there is a connection in order for them to be able to communicate further. The responder language, for example, needs to be heard and understood. The influencer language needs to know that we are connecting and we are communicating. The mover language wants to know what your motive is, and you can make it clear. My motive is to fix this problem for you, etc. Each of the languages has an aspect to them where I can identify with the need of that language in a way that shows that I am going to engage with finding a solution if that solution can be found. So tough conversations like that have to be handled with a sense of internal qualification, where I know that I actually have the internal structure to be able to address this topic or handle this conversation rather than being swayed or tipped by it. And often that can come from learning to increase my communication mastery because I can adapt to those different settings with the strength of what I've learned on the inside. When we don't know our communication styles, then we easily get swayed by whatever's going on around us. But if I can step back and look at what is going on here, how do I understand the science of it, then I can apply the science to the art of finding a resolution and bringing a tough conversation to a reasonable resolution. Next question is this: what's your communication plan when something goes wrong publicly? Hopefully you have a communication plan before something goes wrong. It's always worth putting some planning into what sort of scenarios might go wrong and what would be some broad brush stroke steps that we can build in that will enable us to handle those inevitable crises in a most effective way. The communication plan, first off, needs to be owning that you see that something's gone wrong. Denial is often seen through, particularly in today's society. Anybody who comes out with a denial, people are likely to respond to that with, yeah, right, you're lying kind of approach. So the communication plan needs to own that something went wrong, and it also needs to include measured but I suppose the right word would be high priority response. When I say high priority, I don't mean rushed. What I mean is this is going to the top of the to-do list. This is going to the top of the priority list to address this issue, to resolve this issue, to find out what went wrong, to not necessarily to assign blame, but to find resolution. That's the other thing that's important. The communication plan needs to be focused on finding a win-win resolution if that's at all possible. If a win-win resolution isn't possible, then for the sake of the business, it needs to be the customer who feels like they won rather than the business. Hopefully that's a rare occurrence, but if there's something has gone wrong and it's been our business's fault, then we need to own it and make sure that the customer isn't deprived of a benefit because of our mistake. The opposite would be true if the thing that's going wrong publicly is that there are falsehoods being thrown at you through malice. In that case, you need to take a different approach altogether. You need to issue a clearly worded denial with explanation that proves that your denial is founded on fact and not just on response reactiveness. There needs to be some form of legal involvement with that so that you can be sure that the responses you're making are not in turn defaming those who are accusing you falsely. So it's important to have your legal department or your attorney involved in that process. But at the same time, it's also important not to overblow response to something that is just somebody trying to stir trouble. Very often, a muted response, although a clear response, is far more helpful in toning down those kinds of things. Unfortunately, in today's society, communication can go viral for all the wrong reasons. And the way you handle that will vary according to what goes on in the days subsequently. We've got a whole episode on crisis communication further back in the archives, and I recommend you go back and listen to some more of that as well. But those would be some initial thoughts on what's your communication plan when something goes wrong. And then related to that in crisis communication, the third question is, how do you remain transparent without damaging your reputation? When you own that you've got something wrong and you outline the steps you're taking to improve and to ensure that that wrongdoing or that mistake doesn't happen in the same way again, then you're being transparent in a very helpful way for your business. If your transparency is more about revealing who did what wrong and what they did wrong without there being a solution, or a response to it that's going to grow you for the future, then that will damage your reputation. Because it will seem like anybody who gets anything wrong just gets thrown under the bus, and that the company doesn't really care about anything other than apportioning blame. So that's the distinction between damaging or improving your reputation with transparency. The other thing that will damage your reputation very quickly is a lack of transparency. So if it looks like you're hiding information, or further significant information comes out subsequently, that will be very damaging to your business reputation. So it's important that you have a plan in place ahead of time to be able to be transparent, but transparent in a way that seeks resolution, that seeks win-win, is always going to increase your business's reputation, provided you can follow through on the promises that you're making. I'm thinking of a situation I was aware of just a few months ago where a business messed up a transition to providing a new service. And the people who were receiving that service weren't clear on what they were getting or what they had to do that was different from how it used to be when they weren't being offered that service as part of their package. And the business rather bungled the way of communicating. First off, they didn't communicate ahead of time that the change was happening, and then when it started to go wrong, they admitted that they got it wrong, but they weren't able to provide clear steps publicly, because it was an area where the steps would be different for different customers and things like that, and they couldn't say too much, and it became a damage to their reputation because it wasn't clear that there were steps to resolution for all the people who were affected. So if you can be as transparent as possible about those steps to resolution, it'll be a very helpful addition to your reputation, because now clearly you stand out as a business that cares and a business that takes responsibility. All right, let's change focus to something maybe a little more positive, although just as important. These last three questions are all to do with strategy for growth and scaling your business. So as your business grows, here's the first question: how does communication need to evolve as a business grows? Well, in the early stages, communication is very much the center of everything you do, because if you're building a team or launching a product or beginning to put together a new service or pursuing a new opportunity, the teamwork is going to require a very deep level of communication between the team members. And also you need a diverse strategy for the ways you communicate with each other to ensure you don't miss out any portion of the communication spectrum in your growth. But then as the business gets larger, communication needs to become both more structured and more personalized. When I say more structured and more personalized, there needs to be a clear structure that's a framework or a skeleton, if you like, for the life of the business to be built upon. The larger the animal, the stronger the skeleton. If you go to a natural history museum and you look at some of the skeletons of huge animals like elephants and blue whales, they're amazing. And they've got bones that are way stronger than any human bone. And then if you find a skeleton of, I don't know, a mouse or a rabbit, something small, then the bones are much more delicate, much more fragile. So your communication structure needs to grow and strengthen and be a little more rigid as your business grows. But there also needs to be a personal component where you're training not just the senior leaders, but now you're beginning to get to a level where you have a management level within the business, and your managers need to know how to adapt communication to each of their specific employees so that nobody misses out on the clear structure that is coming from the executive level. And so this is an area I find that businesses can often neglect to their loss when they are growing. the earlier you can train managers, the middle level of the business, the earlier you can train them in communication skills, and in particular adapting communication to specific employees and understanding their employees with a depth of understanding of communication styles, the stronger the business will be, because you have to apply the strong corporate communication structure to the individuals in different ways. And I'm not just talking about the employees within the business. When the management level can do that with the employees on their team or under their management, then those employees are also empowered because they see the manager handling different employees in different ways. They're empowered to interact with different clients or customers in different ways as well. And so that communication IQ oil flows into the whole machine of the business and brings great fruit because of the ability to understand people better and to adapt to connect with them more deeply. How can small business owners use communication as a leadership tool and not just a skill? This is a good question. It is a skill, obviously, let's state that to start with, and it's a skill that all small business owners can greatly benefit from growing and learning. That's why we call it communication IQ. If we can increase your communication IQ, every part of your business is going to benefit from that. But as a leadership tool, I can think of several business clients that I've helped over the years where the leadership are able to navigate the different communication languages, the communication styles, so that they can lead different members of their team in unique ways that help to fulfill their potential and help them understand the strength that they offer to the team. And so leaders can build stronger teams by increasing diversity when they understand the different communication styles. It's not easy to build a diverse team until you can understand how to connect with people who are different. But once you can have a diverse team, then the business benefits from that. Another leadership tool would be being able to bring the best out of each of your team members, especially if you've got a team where several different folks are beginning to step up into different forms of leadership. As a small business grows, maybe you've got, I don't know, maybe you've got the customer facing employees, and then you've got the employees kind of in the back room who are fulfilling the expectations, whatever it may be, whether it's shipping products or whether it's maintaining business in some way, some service business. You've got the ones who are on the front end interacting with the clients, the realtors or the insurance salespeople, those kind of folks. And then behind them, you've got the paralegals, or you've got the customer service staff, you've got the production team, you've got the shipping department, whatever it might be. The communication styles in those different departments, as they grow into departments, will need to be different. And so a leadership tool for a small business owner is to be able to adapt their communication to those different areas to make a connection where the different groups feel part of one big whole. That there is a unity in the commitment to the business, and by implication commitment to the small business owner, which comes through because the business owner can communicate effectively in each of those different areas. And then final question, what's one communication shift you made that had a big impact on your business? If you're asking me, which you are, I guess the communication shift I made was to recognize that communication is not just a tool, it's actually the heart of everything we do in business. So when I shifted to recognize that communication was not just something to teach leaders because they needed that skill, but communication is actually the oxygen those leaders are breathing as they lead, then that changed the way that I conducted my business. I literally shifted from a general coaching approach to a communication coaching approach, because I recognized I can make the biggest difference in the most important, most fundamental area for anybody in whatever role that they are, whether they're a leader of a small business, or they're the owner of a big company, or they're on the executive team of a non-profit, or wherever they are. Every one of us has to communicate in everyday life. So by focusing on communication, that shift has enabled me to make more difference in the lives of my clients. But then the shift that goes with that, and this took me a while to realize it, which is why I talk about it so often on the podcast, is I had to shift to being intentional about adapting my communication in every setting. To start with, that felt inauthentic, because now I'm changing the way I talk to people based on who I'm talking to. But actually it is authentic to do that, because what I'm communicating is the same truth that I carry, but the way I'm communicating it varies from person to person, so that each one can receive it more deeply, more effectively, more productively. And so that communication shift of intentionally adapting has made a big difference to how many people can receive what I have to offer. So I hope that's helpful to you. These have been some really interesting questions this week, so thank you for those. And click the text me link in the show notes. Send me your questions, whatever topic it is around communication. What do you want to know? What's the question that's left in your mind after today's episode? I look forward to getting your responses and your feedback. And if you'd like to leave a review in your podcast platform for this whole podcast, I'd be grateful for that too. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It would mean a lot to me if you'd rate and review the podcast, so it helps more listeners to find us. But also, would you give me your feedback on things you'd like to hear about in future episodes? And remember to share the episode with a friend if you see something that would benefit them as well. You can reach me with feedback through my website at markburlinson.com. Just click on the contact button and send me a message. I respond to everyone personally, and I really want to hear from you. So thank you again for listening, sharing, reviewing, and giving me your feedback.